Hey guys, my name is Catherine, and today we're going to be building a SoulCycle chatbot with DialogFlow. DialogFlow is a tool that you can use to build voice and chatbot experiences. So if you think of your Facebook chatbots, your Twitter bots, your Slack bots, all of those can be built with DialogFlow. You can also build things for virtual assistants. And so if you think of, Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, these have third-party functionalities or third-party skills and actions that you can build with DialogFlow. So let's get started. Today, we are going to be creating a SoulCycle chatbot. This isn't sponsored by SoulCycle, I wish it was, but they are pretty techy and their website is cool, so we're making a SoulCycle chatbot. SoulCycle features indoor cycling classes that are super intense, and if you haven't tried them, I have a referral code down below. But essentially, we are going to make a prototype that lets you book a SoulCycle class through voice and text. To start off, we're going to need to use DialogFlow. They used to be called api.ai, but they were bought by Google recently, and they changed their name to DialogFlow. So the reason why, it's important to know is that when you're looking up documentation or you're struggling with something, you might want to use the search term api.ai instead of DialogFlow to help find your answer if you can't find it initially. Now, what is DialogFlow? Ultimately, DialogFlow is an NLP engine, a natural language processing engine. It simply converts what you say, which is called an utterance, into what meaning or intent it has. With our chatbot, there are many things a user could say. The user could ask what classes are available or how much does this class cost. Both of these utterances, both of these things a user could say, have different meanings and map to different intents. There are also many different ways to say the same thing. To ask about class availability, the user could say what times are available or what classes are available or any number of other things. These would all map to the same intent. To convert what the user says to its meaning is where DialogFlow comes in. For the case of our chatbot, the user is going to say many different things, and the program is going to recognize the following intents or meanings: the welcome intent, classes available intent, the book a class intent, the not interested intent, and then the fallback intent. For each of these intents, there will be many different things the user can say, many utterances that will map to these intents, and ultimately trigger these intents, which will invoke a response. For example, if the user asks what classes are available or something similar, the user's utterance will be associated with the classes available intent. If the user responds with a class time and wants to book that given class, the utterance will be mapped to the book a class intent. If the user says cancel or stop, the utterance will be mapped to the not interested intent. The fallback intent catches anything that the user says that is not mapped to any of our intents. Let's go ahead and try to implement this chatbot by creating a conversational agent in DialogFlow. With DialogFlow, we can set the specific meanings a user can have and then set the utterances or the things the user can say that map to these meanings. So here we have a window open, a browser open, and we're at dialogflow.com. So this is a Google-owned company website, and we're going to click Go to Console. And after we click that, it's probably going to prompt us to log in. And since it's a Google website owned by Google, you can sign in with your Google account. And so if you have Gmail or something like that, you're already good to go. Otherwise, you will have to create an account. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in here. Now we're logged in, and our first step is going to be to create a DialogFlow agent. You might be seeing something a little bit different on your screen, and that's because I've already created a few agents before. But basically, all we're going to do is click Create New Agent. What are we going to call this agent? In this case, we're just going to call it SoulCycle. We're going to create a new Google project, which will make more sense later, and we'll click Create. And so this is creating a new chatbot agent for us. So it's going to be the thing that we're talking to. If I want to say, hey, talk to SoulCycle, give me some information about X, this is the agent that I'm actually talking to. So this is going to load, and then we'll be able to add our utterances and intents and all of that good stuff we were talking about before. The first two intents that we get for free are the default fallback intent and the default welcome intent. So I'm going to click on the default welcome intent just to see what configurations we can configure and set up and really make this our own. At the top here, we have contexts, and basically we use these to navigate where a user is in a conversation and remember certain values that a user might have responded with throughout the intents. For example, if the user told us his or her name was Charlie, we could save it in a context and use it in a later response. Next, we have events, and events are a way we can trigger an intent without the need for text or spoken input. So for the Google Assistant, for example, you can just open that action and it'll give you a little welcome message. That's an event that would trigger that welcome intent. Then we have training phases, and these are our utterances, or the things the user will say that should be mapped to this intent. These are phrases that the user will say to trigger this intent or this specific meaning. So in this case, I have the one option of it's just the event that I've opened the app, but if I say like hi or hello or hey, then we'll give you a welcome saying, welcome to SoulCycle, blah, 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 blah. Then we have actions. Once an intent is triggered, actions are sent to the fulfillment, and basically they help us keep track of this specific intent. Fulfillment is something we'll learn about a little bit later on, but parameters are specific words or phrases we are trying to collect from the user in order to complete a task. We'll see this in action in a bit. Next, we have responses. The response is what we're going to send back to the user. So if the user says, hi, hello, hey, the machine basically matches that with the welcome intent. Okay, I know it's the welcome intent, let me send you back a welcome message, and then it says, welcome to SoulCycle, blah, 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 blah. And, in another case, the user could reply with their name, and then we go ahead and use that name as the machine. We're building this response and reply to them with that name. So basically, our response can depend on what the user inputs. We'll see this a little bit later on. In this case, we are going to actually change our response to a single response. And so we're going to have a text response here, and it's going to be, welcome to the SoulCycle chatbot, and it's just a little welcome message. Would you like to book a bike at our studio? And so this is giving them, an opportunity to respond yes or no, and then instead of saying yes or no, we are telling them, if so, you should enter C available classes. I can never spell available correctly. If not, enter not interested. This last bit right here is set, this intent as the end of the conversation. In this case, we do not want to do that because we're just starting off that conversation and we've asked the user a question, so we'll leave that unchecked. Lastly, we have fulfillment, and this is something we're going to come back to again a little bit later. For now, let's hit save, and this will save this intent. It will save the configurations, what we put for the response, what we put for our training phases, for our utterances, the things the user can say that will trigger this intent. We're saving all of that right here, and then it trains our agent. Our agent is that SoulCycle. This is our agent. And if we click intents again, we'll see our intents as they are laid out for us. So let's test it. If I say hi, hello, we'll say hi. Does it respond with that welcome message? And in this case, it does. Here we are, welcome to the SoulCycle chatbot. Would you like to book a bike? Blah, 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 blah. So this pane on the right here, this is basically where we can test our application. We can test our agent. Does it work as we expect it? And then it has this mic here that we can also use to test it. But basically if I say, hey, does it bring me that welcome message? And you can test out all of your utterances, things the user says right here, see if it's matched to the right intent. So in this case, this is the intent, and then what did it respond with? We can double check that. This middle pane, this is where the body of our work will be done. This is where we set up our configurations. We set up, in this, not in later cases, but in this case where we set the response. In this case also where we set our utterances. And then this left pane, that is where we, how we navigate through this software. All right, so now that we know that it works, let's try adding some more functionality. In this case, we said, would you like to book a bike at our studio? What if they say yes to that question? What if they say they enter see available classes? We, as the chatbot, will need to recognize they said see available classes and then give them that appropriate response. So to do that, that's a completely different intent, a different meaning of, what are the classes that are available? So we're creating a new intent, and we're going to call this classes available. We are going to skip contexts and events because we don't need to worry about those for the simplest chatbot that we're trying to create. Don't need to worry about those right now. And we're going to enter some utterances, some training phrases. These are things the user could say that would trigger this intent. That would basically say, oh, they said this. This is what they mean. All right, let me give you that response. So see available classes, and I'm just going to put in a couple different options here. Now we are done with our training phases. We're done putting in our utterances, and so we can scroll down. But first, we could actually, if we wanted to, we could add a context basically saying like, oh, we've given a user the list of available classes, and because we've done that, that might impact our response. We're not going to do that right now, but it's something to keep in mind. Also, you could add an action name that aligns with this intent to keep, to help you keep track of it in the fulfillment. We're not going to do that right now. It's kind of out of the scope of this video, but we're going to keep rolling along to the response. And so again, we're going to add a single response to this. We'll say, great. We have SoulCycle classes every day, and then we'll go ahead and give them the list of available classes. So we have classes at 6 a.m., 8 a.m., 4:30 p.m., and 7:30 p.m. And then we again ask the user a question, which are you interested in? So that means we're not going to set this intent as the end of the conversation. Fulfillment, we're not there yet, so we are just going to hit save. And this will save this intent. It will save the utterances that trigger this intent. We are all saved. It's training. It's doing all that good stuff. And we are going to go ahead and add another intent. And so the next intent we're going to add is basically the user, user says, hey, we give them the welcome message. The user says, see available classes. We give them the available class times, but then we ask them, okay, what are you interested in? Now we need another intent for the user that basically says, I'm interested in the 6 a.m. or I'm interested in the 8 a.m. or whatever, whichever one they're interested in. So in this case, we're going to call it book a class, because they're going to try to book the class that they're interested in. And we are going to give it a few training phrases. And if you think about it, really that class time is like a variable. So if I say 6 a.m. versus 8 a.m., that's a value. It's a value for the variable of the time of the class. So that class time can have the value of 6 a.m., 8 a.m., 4:30 p.m., and then 7:30 p.m. So how do we deal with that type of functionality in a voice agent? Well, we use something called an entity. So I'm going to save this and we'll come back to it. And the entity is basically like our variable, and we'll create one right now. And basically it's going to be a class time entity, a class time variable, and it's going to have a series of values. Our reference value we'll say is 6 a.m. So 6 a.m. has a lot of different synonyms, and so I can say it like that, 6, I want the 6 o'clock class, 6 like that. I could say 6 a.m. There are a lot of different ways you can say 6 a.m., but basically we want all of those to map to the 6 a.m. value. That is a value of class time. And so class time can have the value 6 a.m., and there are many different ways that you can say that value. And then we're going to do the same for the other class times. We'll go ahead and save this and then jump back to our intent and use these values in our intent. So we're going to be using this entity, and in our utterances we'll be using the values of that entity. So I'm going to go back to my book a class intent, and then for these training phases I'm going to say these are things that the user would say. So the user might say book the 8 o'clock bike. And notice it recognizes the 8 o'clock as a class time and then says, oh, we should recognize that. I'm going to go ahead and fill in a couple of different things the user could say that mean this same thing. Now you've probably noticed that our class times are highlighted. This is because DialogFlow pulls out these times and marks them since we defined a custom entity called class time, that custom variable. Essentially, this class time entity is a parameter that the user provides a value for. Scrolling down, we can make this parameter actually required so that the user must respond with the class time in order to book a class. So we'll go ahead and check the is required, and then we could say what time. If like the user doesn't provide a class time, how should we prompt the user for it? What time, do you want to do that? And then that is all set up. Then for our response, we can scroll down and say, great, your bike is booked for, and then we can actually use what value that the user put in for that parameter. So I can just go class time or $class time, and if the user said 8 a.m., then we'll go ahead and put 8 a.m. in this slot. If the user said 4:30 p.m., that's what we put in that slot. It's dependent on what the user responds with. And then we can say, see you then. Now that the user's booked the class, we can go ahead and set this intent as the end of the conversation. And then we'll go ahead and save this. It will train, it will do all of that good stuff. So now we have the user flow for if the user wants to book a class. If they want to book a class, they'll say see available classes and then respond with the class time that they want to, take. What if the user doesn't want to take a class, or they heard the class times and now they're not interested? What about those scenarios? Well, again, they require additional intents. So I'm going to go ahead and create another intent, and this intent is going to be for those that are not interested. And so we'll say not interested. And then our training phases are going to be cancel, stop, no, not interested. Again, you could add more, but just to keep this simple. And then for our text response, we could say, thank you for using the SoulCycle chatbot. And then we can mark this as the end of the conversation because they're not interested. Great, thanks for using the service, but we're kicking you out. It's the end of the conversation. So we'll save this, it will train, do all of that good stuff. You might be thinking that, why can't I just write a bunch of if statements? Well, you could, but what if I did, hello with an extra O? So if I go hello, it still maps to that welcome intent response. Welcome to the SoulCycle chatbot, blah, blah, blah. If you had if statements, you could do a little fudging here and there, but it's machine learning that's really going to be powering this. Now, let's go back to the last intent that we have not touched yet. So we've already done book a class, class is available, not interested. Now, let's go back to our fallback intent. And here, we're just going to add a response. So basically, if the user says something that the machine does not understand it again, here are going to be the different responses. And these are good responses, but I would rather guide the user to the right answer. So basically guiding the user on what they should say versus what their options are. I can say this or I can say this. Basically acting like the user doesn't know what they're doing at all, versus just not understanding what they're saying. So, because you can say the same, it's just like when you ask Siri or, whatever voice assistant, 5 times the same thing, they don't get you. It's because you are probably not saying the right word, not that it didn't understand the word you said. So in this case, we'll say, would you like to book a bike at our studio? If so, while this is pretty similar to the welcome intent, it's also different because this is triggered when we don't know what the user is saying, when the machine just does not understand what the user is saying. We're not rerouting them to the welcome intent because we don't want to welcome them again. We just want them, to know like, hey, didn't understand your response. I'm going to kind of reroute you, and here are the 2 things that you can say. So let's go ahead and save this, and we can test it out. So let's say hi again. Great, hi, we get that welcome message. We'll say see available classes. Hopefully all this works. Great, it knows I want to do classes. Okay, here are specific classes. Let's try the 6 a.m. That's the one I want to do. Great, your bike is booked for 6 a.m. See you then. Okay, now if I say hi again, what if I say I'm not interested? Oh, thank you for using the chatbot, and it's the end of the whole little thing. Now what if I said something like hi, and then I say see available classes, and then I say not interested? Okay, we're still redirected to that. Now what if I say hi again, and then I say something weird that it just doesn't get? We see I missed that because maybe this didn't save. With that saved, we get the appropriate response. Now, why is this exciting and why does it even matter? Well, with DialogFlow, we can also have integrations. So now that I've built this chatbot, it's one thing, it's great that it works in this little window, but that's only for me. What if I could integrate it with other things? And that is where our integration page comes in. And this is really, really exciting because you can create a chatbot for any of these platforms or services. Leave a comment down below on your favorite platform listed here, and I can make a video showing you how to integrate this specific chatbot into that platform. But it's pretty straightforward. Essentially, a chatbot is just converting user utterances, what the user says, into intents or meanings, and creating a program that sends the appropriate response based on that utterance and intent. In this case, the response we sent was hard-coded. So if I go back to where we sent that response, it was the one response, this is what we said. We never said anything else different. There were a couple of changes depending on what the user said. We got that $ class time, but for the most part it was hard-coded. We sent back the same thing every time. But what if we wanted the response to change depending on the class time entered? We do this a little bit when we access that parameter, but when we say book a class, we access that class time entity, the value for that parameter, when we say, $ class time. But what if we wanted to say, instructor Susan will be teaching this class? That's an extra piece of information that we basically can't put in here. We can't say, if your class time is this, go ahead and say that this instructor is teaching it. That requires another layer, and that layer is fulfillment. If we want to add API calls or have dynamic information in our response, we would need to add a fulfillment to this agent. Essentially, fulfillment is code that's deployed through a web service to provide data to a user, and it's where AWS Lambda or Google Functions might come in. If you're interested in learning about fulfillment and how to implement it, leave a comment down below and I'll make a tutorial about it. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned something new, and be sure to subscribe if you want more tutorials. If you're interested in a more in-depth technical lesson, check out my LinkedIn learning courses down below. Thank you for watching.